Good afternoon, or good evening, or good day to everyone from any part of the world you are joining us from. I think this should be I think day three of the Empowering Youth for Climate Advocacy. And yes, we'll be having a thorough session on forest management as a tool for climate advocacy. Why forest management? I think these are some of the things that we'll have time to look into. So about me, I think a lot of people know me, but I think some of you might not really know me. So I'm a chemical engineer by profession, but I'm also into development. Then I also teach in several universities based on contacts from companies and organizations. And I'm also a co-founder of several initiatives, amongst them Life Learning and AfriDat. And I offer a lot of coaching to startup and to young ones in different areas. I do a lot of things that has to do with decarbonization, strategy, hydrogen economy, green economy, circular economy. And I think some of the things you hear from this talk will give you some insight into what this is all about. So what you will learn from this session are pretty simple. We'll talk about the climate system. We'll talk about CO2 emission and where it comes from and the effects. We'll talk about the human actions and the effects. What science is telling us. I have a video where we can really see what researchers are doing when it comes to forest management, using it to solve climate change issues. And how forests play a key role in climate mitigation. So if I may ask, what are the components of climate system? Please, you can answer at random. You can put on your microphone to answer. You can write in the chat. Feel free. So what are the components of the climate system? Don't be shy. So maybe I should put on my camera. So what are the components of climate system? Any answer is allowed. So just give it a try.
I can give some examples.
Go ahead, please.
Land surface or atmosphere.
Great, great. Okay, thank you. So we also have climate advocacy, climate finance. Okay. These are not components of climate system. Great. Atmosphere, hydrosphere, aerosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere. Thank you, Adekunle. Thank you. So I think atmosphere, hydrosphere, aerosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere. So let's go to see how they exist. Thank you for all these answers. So, so we pretty know that here we have the atmosphere. So we have the oceans, and we have the biosphere. So we have the land. So that has to do with different structures. And we also have the cryosphere. So this provides us with the understanding that the climate system is a system of several systems. So for example, when we take the cryosphere, for example, we mean the ice sheet, we mean the sea, the ocean, we mean, because they melt to have the hydrosphere, which is the ocean, So the ice, they melt to have the ocean, you have the hydrosphere. So you also have the cryosphere, which has to do with the aspect of land and other aspects. Then you have the atmosphere, which is, let's say, above the land, which is the air and other composition, chemical composition that you have. And you have several effects of all this. So you have the human influence, you have the glaciers, you have the volcanic eruptions, you have the cloud, you have different things. So all these atmosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, cryosphere, they all make the components of the climate system. So when we continue, you will be able to see how they all interact. They interact simultaneously and sometimes independently, but they have a lot of effect on one another. So going further, I think I will want Natasha to share the Menti link where we have what are the causes of global warming? So a quick question, what are the causes of global warming? So I will go to I'll stop sharing, I'll go to the Menti, then everyone, let's see the answers from everyone. So great. We're already having good responses. So great. Yeah. So what are the causes of global warming? So we have climate change, okay, deforestation, transport and vehicles, CO2 emission, air pollution. So we have 4 responses. So we want more. If we have to, if we get up to 10, I think that's a good number. So what are the causes of global warming? Carbon dioxide, thank you. Climate gender injustice, great, fantastic. Industrialization, good. Manufacturing goods, farming, pollution, producing food, greenhouse gases, great. So one more. So we just one more response. So when we have one more, then we can go on. As soon as it's up to 10, I think we can go on. We have 21 people here, so I think we should have more responses.
Actually, someone wrote in the chat.
Chat?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
first of all, okay, first of all, no recycling of waste products. Okay, good. Okay, so we have in total 11. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you. Good. So this gives us an overview of the domain we are dealing with. Good. Okay, so let's move on. So here I have a chart that illustrates the human caused global warming and climate change. So you have the causes, you have the effects, and you have the feedback. So let's take it one after the other. So we have combustion of fossil fuel. We have in agricultural sector some of the effects of our fertilizer usage, some of the effects of animal keeping. So there's a lot around this, where you have CO2 emission from also farm produce. You have deforestation, and all these cause greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases, we mean carbon dioxide, methane, so which you can find in many farms, and nitrous oxide, which you can also find in many farms, water vapor. So what is the main effects? So you have global warming and resultant climate change. Then when you now want to break it down, so you have extreme weather, which has direct harm to safety and health. You have crop and infrastructure failure. You have sea level rise. You have human migration, conflicts, and you have invasive species movement, biodiversity loss, and the likes. So these are some of the feedback that you see, and this gives you an overview of the global warming, climate change, causes, effect feedback. Now, having this in mind, what we know is that since 1900, when this data were being collated, it has been observed that from 1900 down to up to this moment, we continuously have CO2 increase. We have CO2 increase. And when we have CO2 increase, it was also observed that we have increase in the temperature of the globe. So that means the more we have CO2 increase into the atmosphere, the more we have the increase in global temperature, so which is the global warming. So this gives you an indicator that the effect of us having CO2 emission produce or result into increasing the temperature of the globe. Do we have any question? Good. Now, going further, so we know that CO2 and other greenhouse gases, especially CO2, they result in the warming of the earth. And when we have this, we have situations like this. Wildfire in Australia because of high temperature in the forest. We have the melting of the polar region. You can see everything is getting to melt. And this will result into what? Flooding in some areas, in some part of the world. At the same time, when there is high temperature, you have arid areas, places that are more or less like even rivers, they become arid. And all these are some of the effects which we know and which we can see. Now, going further, the CO2 emission, like I said, is a continuous process in increments. So this is the data up to 2018. So from 1958 down to 2018, you have the increase in CO2. And one of the major reasons is global dependence on fossil fuel, that is the combustion of fossil fuel, and industrial processes. You know, we do a lot of cement production, iron and steel production, manufacturing, all those things, they emit a lot of CO2. Now, going further, let's look at the global data, which are very current as far as countries that are the largest emitter of CO2. And what has happened in 2021 compared to 2010. So as you can see, this is China. So China had increments in 2021 based on what they had in 2010. USA had reduction based on what they had in 2010. India had increments. So let's go to Germany. So Germany had reduction. So when you look at a lot of countries that are having reduction between 2021 and 2010, that shows that they're already making some mitigation strategies, some efforts to help to reduce the CO2 emission based on different processes that we've mentioned earlier on. Let's look at this data again. I like to work with data a lot. And let's look at what is happening globally. So when you look at Africa, South and Central America, Middle East, Europe, North America, Asia Pacific, and the Commonwealth of Independent States. What gives us more information here is that Asia Pacific are the largest emitter of CO2, which as a result of China. Then followed by North America, USA in particular. Then we can now move to Europe. Germany as a major country that's emits CO2. Then you look at maybe the Middle East. You look at South America. No, okay, before that, you have the Commonwealth of Independent States. Then you now look at Africa. So you can see Africa play less role. In fact, it's less than 3% of the global emission. So this gives us the opportunity to see that no matter how different countries tries to reduce, while some are still emitting, it has an effect on every one of us. It's an equal effect on everyone. So we need to do something, and this is the reason why we're here. So let's take a look at the CO2 emission and wealth. So we know some wealthy countries, as you can see, this is gross domestic product, so purchasing power, parity per capita. So we know the rich countries are in this zone. Russia, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Canada, USA, Luxembourg, and the likes. So they are the major emitters. But when you look at the countries that are not that rich, so Chad, Congo, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, they emit less CO2. Ghana and the likes, Angola, so Vietnam. So India, it should be categorized as one of the emitters, not that rich, but one of the emitters. So this provides us with an indication that industrialized nations are the largest emitters of CO2 because they depend on fossil fuel to develop their economy. And in that case, they will be polluting the atmosphere. So going further, let's look at the industrial age when we have different industrial revolution. So we look at the industrial revolution from 1850, which was based on coal. And from 1900, it was based on oil. And from 1950, it was based on gas. Then we have cement production to along the line from 1952. So it shows you that this fuel mix are the major emitters of CO2, and many advanced nations have built their nation infrastructure on this fossil fuel. And this is why we have the largest set of emission from them. So it's a moral obligation on all these nations to support the global climate action. Now, let's take a recap. I mean, we've seen industrial activities. We've seen the effects on farmlands. We've seen wildfire. So what is a typical scenario in your country? Anybody can answer this? When it comes to climate mitigation, what's the typical scenario in your country? Kindly unmute and answer. Hello? I hope I'm not here alone. Hello?
Okay, maybe Anna, you raise your hand, you can speak.
Hello, I'm Anna. I'm from Armenia, and in my country, I can give the example of war, which has been ruining a lot of the nature in Armenia, and the big parts which were tourist attractions. The nature there is completely ruined because of the war. Now the part of the territory is with Azerbaijan, so that's a good example of what created pollution, I guess, in my country mostly.
Oh, great. So now I think I like this scenario you gave. So political instability has resulted into conflict. And when there's conflict, there's a lot of pollution with maybe all these warfare materials, bombs and the likes. So this has resulted into pollution. I quite agree with you. And this has a major effect. And one of the effects is you have a kind of migration. Do you agree with me? Hello? Hello?
Maybe Anna.
Okay. Then let me move on. I was trying to link this to other effects, which I will show you later on.
We
Okay,
have
go
another hand as well from Rima.
Okay, go on, please.
So Rima, you can.
Hi. In
Hello.
my country, due to deforestation, many things happens like not actually this scenario shown in the pictures, but it's quite different because due to deforestation, our lands are like it's landslide and then floods. Even in the urban area, it was not well managed, and then even the rivers are like it's like dumping site.
Yeah.
not actual the river. So it's because of overpopulation and then
Okay.
deforestation and then urbanization. So there is a vast changes has come to the climate in our country, and I'm from Nepal. Yeah,
Okay, great. I mean, thank you for this example.
thank you.
Yeah, urbanization, industrialization, these also have a lot of effects on climate issues. Okay, let's move on. Thank you for all these answers. Thank you. So let's move on. So if I may ask, so what are the main sources of CO2 emission? Anyone can answer this?
So yeah, Mika, you can.
One major emitter is usually the industrial sector. So, for example, the coal industry, or just generally the energy sector to produce energy, is often linked to the usage of fossil fuels, and that emits carbon dioxide, which is very terrible. Another huge field is the farming industry, and especially if you look at the usage of water that is needed, also of energy that is being used. And one big problem there is that you need a lot of, the big production of food for example, animals that are then being killed for us to consume them, which is a huge field which emits a lot of CO2. And then just general transport. So, for example, fossil fuels that are being used for transportation, such as in cars, airplanes, ships, whatsoever.
Oh, great, thank you. So we also have from Tatevik. So she said industrial processes, Sabrina, fuel consumption. We also have natural resources such as forest, wildlife. Good. I mean, the main ones are transportation, energy sector, agriculture, and the like. So everything, and industrial sector. So, and burning of coal, yes, burning of coal is a major one. Thank you, Ibrahim Mohammed. Thank you. So, yeah, so let's move on. Let's move on. There's more to say. So, what are the interventions made by different stakeholders around the world? So, we've heard of COP27, COP20 this, COP25, all the COP in this world, which means Conference of Parties. And they provided a framework which is designed by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So where the major objective is to stabilize greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. So that was a major purpose of them having this COP. And they started in 1992 down to 2021. And recently we know that the COP27 just ended a couple of weeks ago in Egypt. So, and the way, I mean, this is still the same discussion that is ongoing. So, and you can see several actors, several places that this has happened. And the major points is to have an understanding amongst nations to help to reduce CO2 emission into the atmosphere. That's the key. Now, part of the climate change mitigation that have been suggested so far, you have one is to improve energy efficiency by opting for renewable energy over fossil fuel. We have promoting public transport and sustainable mobility, like car sharing, using bicycle, and different ways, using biofuel for aviation and the likes. And also even reducing trips and different things that people have suggested. We also have promoting ecological industry, agriculture, fishing, and livestock farming, food sustainability, responsible consumption, and the 3 R's, which is reduce, reuse, recycle. And the last one is by taxing the use of fossil fuel and CO2 emission markets. So these are some of the main climate mitigation strategy that you can find and which have been part of what this framework from the COP is focusing on. Now, going further, so we need to really know how forests play a key role in climate mitigation. One aspect is the large quantity of CO2 being emitted are being consumed within the forest. So as human, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out CO2. As plants, they breathe in CO2 and they emit oxygen. So when forests are destroyed, they release large quantity of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which contributes to climate change. So that means there won't be a place to keep this CO2 and this stays in the atmosphere. Another aspect is forests are the largest storehouse for carbon after the ocean, because we have the ocean, we also have the forests. However, when forests are destroyed by activities such as logging of wood and land conversion for agriculture, they release large quantities of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And the last one, reducing deforestation and forest degradation must be part of the solution to global climate change. So these are key indicators for us. And when we look at how this forest management is related to different aspects of the SDG. So we have SDG 1 to 17. So we have SDG Goal 1, Goal 2, 6, 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 17. So this provides you with an indicator that it's part of the major global action to help to mitigate climate change. So this is giving you an overview that it's important we consider forest management in whatever sector we are into. So going further, I will quickly want you to have a look at a video, and we'll be back and we'll give our opinion. Then we'll go into different breakout rooms to test our abilities on some things.
Through everyday activities, changes in the environment will occur.
Most scientists who work on the climate change subject are concerned that these changes could accelerate and could also have some effects on the way people live and the way ecosystems function.
In order to mitigate effects on ecosystems, we need to know if anything can be done to offset the impacts of rising temperatures. One hypothesis is that as carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, oceans and forests will take up more and more of the gas.
Forests cover a large part of the world, and there are two systems that hold carbon. Forests is one of them, oceans are the other. So if we can study and understand how forests absorb the carbon, how much they take in, how much they're releasing, we can get a better understanding of what's going to happen around the world with respect to carbon.
Forests are vital to our planet, in part because they can absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
As forests absorb carbon dioxide, they're taking that carbon and converting it into tree stuff.
The mass of the tree, 95% of it, was formerly atmospheric carbon dioxide that was taken up in the process of photosynthesis, laid down in various sugars, accumulated into wood, leaves, bark, roots, all sorts of tissues.
By absorbing carbon dioxide, forests could mitigate the effects of climate change on the ecosystems that we rely on.
We're measuring the second stem
to find out if trees are growing faster as more CO2 is put into the atmosphere.
8.1.
Jess Parker and a large team of researchers and volunteers have been tracking the growth of forest plots young and old.
This is not a sweet gum. Notice the bark is quite different from these guys. And the leaves are different. The sweet gum leaves look a little bit like a, like a maple, but this has leaves like that.
The team has so far measured about 50,000 trees on 55 different plots of land. A lot of the field work has been done by volunteers from the local community or members of the HSBC Corporation who take a week away from work to learn about forests and climate change.
125, please.
I have as many as 12 volunteers who help me out in measuring trees. and a variety of other things as well. And some of them have been with me for many years. And really, this work couldn't get done without them.
Great job.
It's not
guys.
particularly difficult to make a measurement of a diameter of a tree,
Great.
but to get a good estimate of biomass in an area, you need to measure a lot of trees.
Diameter is 6.8.
6.6.
This one is 7.1 centimeters in diameter.
Our measurement here is 75 centimeters diameter.
For each tree, we measure the diameter, we assess the X and Y coordinates, we assess the species, we give a tag number, we put the tag on, we figure out whether it's alive or dead or dying, and then we figure out the crown condition.
The light is hitting from the top.
Is this the pressure intermediate?
I think it looks like it's intermediate. Because it's got about 2-3 trees blocking it, so
Okay, but
not enough light.
it's getting sunlight from the top.
Right.
Okay.
The diameter, as well as noting species and age, allow for calculations for determining the biomass of each tree. About 95% of the biomass of any tree is carbon.
Biomass is the total above ground weight of a tree. So what we usually do is connect an easy to measure observation, such as the diameter of the tree, to this difficult one, biomass. And it turns out there's a large number of published equations, especially in North America, that connect the diameter of a tree to its biomass. And so that's what we use.
And based on that diameter, we can determine how much biomass or stuff is in that tree.
Well, I'm fundamentally interested in how forests grow over the long term. So we had a large number of plots, areas of forests that were of the same kind, the different ages, and in which we measured the diameter of every tree in the plot. And then using various published equations, we figured out how much biomass there was in the plot. Normally, you're just looking at these plots once to get a snapshot of how the whole ensemble is behaving. But in our case, we went back and remeasured them as many as 8 times. And because of that remeasurement, we were able to see something about the recent behavior of those plots relative to the long-term behavior.
Okay, go back 10 centimeters.
In addition to using field data to track the total biomass of each tree over time, cores of trees are also used to estimate the age and the rate of growth.
And what we can see here is that this is where the bark was, right? And down here is the center of the tree.
The cores reveal tree rings, and the spaces between the rings reveal how fast a given tree grew during a given year.
You can actually estimate how large the tree was at any time in the past by subtracting these ring widths from its current diameter. So you can construct a history of the biomass of the tree all the way back to infancy.
All of the data, from tree cores to measuring the diameters of trees over time, presented a real surprise.
And the general trend is for forests to start growing rapidly, but then slow down with age. So the contrast would be between a young forest with little biomass, but really rapid growth, and an old forest with lots of biomass, but not very much growth. So this is the trend that we would expect. But what we found when we looked at the individual stands that we measured repeatedly was that instead of having this growth rate for a young forest, it was doing this. And instead of this growth rate for an intermediate forest, it was doing that. And instead of this growth rate for an old forest, it was doing that. In some 80% of the cases that we looked at, they were growing a lot faster than expected.
Is this much faster rate of growth of trees a natural solution for climate change?
Well, if the trees are growing faster, that means they're taking more CO2 out of the air. So to the extent that this is an effect that was stimulated by CO2 in the atmosphere, it probably means, or it could mean, that the CO2 concentrations are rising less rapidly than it would.
Tree growth is right now keeping up with rising CO2 levels, but perhaps eventually the amounts of water and nutrients, what trees also need to grow, will be limited, and tree growth will not continue at the current accelerated rate.
There's probably a stimulatory effect on the part of the extra atmospheric CO2, but we don't think it can go on for very long. First of all, eventually trees run into other limitations, such as the availability of water, or nutrients in the soil.
There may be a certain point where no matter how much carbon dioxide you have in the atmosphere, the forest will no longer be able to grow because they just don't have the other resources that they need.
To get a better idea on how long this accelerated growth will continue, Jess and his team are implementing new techniques for measuring tree growth. One technique is using a dendrometer. The dendrometer is wrapped around the trunk of a tree. As the tree expands, so will the dendrometer, and the amount the diameter has changed can be measured down to 1/100th of a millimeter.
And that's a distance far thinner than your own hair. First, I insert the jaws of the caliper into the gap. And here I got 42.98 millimeters. If we make measurements frequently throughout the growing season, we can figure out when the tree began to grow. We can figure out when it stopped growing. And we can even see small-term responses to things like droughts. They're really best for getting fine time-based measurements of the responses of the trees.
This data will give a clearer answer to whether forests will continue to grow at an accelerated rate, providing a barrier between us and a rapidly changing world, or slow down in their growth rates, bringing the effects of climate change sooner than later.
I think that as our population continues to grow and we continue to consume, I think it's still really important to be kind to our environment and be cautious with, how much fossil fuels we burn, whether we burn wood, but how much we're cutting down forests, not just for fuel, but for agriculture and other purposes. We don't know if there's a limit to how much forests can grow. I mean, there may be a point where they are no longer the carbon sink, which is what we're trying to find out.
Okay, thank you for this. Thank you. So shall we continue? So welcome back from your short break. I hope you were able to take some time to stretch your leg and walk around, take some coffee or some drink, some tea, some water. Okay, so we've been able to, I really want to have some feedback from this video, but since anyone is not ready to give us some feedback, then this will lead us to one or two aspects. Okay, no worries, Dr. Hai. So yeah, good. So yes, let's move on. So now we shall look into a challenge, and this is called the Forest and Climate Change Challenge. And you are going to play different role. We'll share the mirror board where different groups will be, and possibly maybe the breakout rooms will have to be created. So let me see if I can do this directly. So okay, so the first point here is we shall have 4 groups. We have Team A, Team B, Team C, and Team D. And in this group, you are to play, for example, Team A is to play the role of politician, policy experts, policy makers. Team B, you are to play the role of corporate organizations, banks, trade organizations, industry, businesses. And Team C, you are to play the role of youth organization and non-government organization. And Team C, you are to play the role of indigenous people and local authorities. I'll be coming into the room once in a while, and possibly this will provide you with the opportunity to interact with one another. So the main question is very simple: to mitigate and adapt to climate change through sustainable forest management as a team of maybe A, B, C, whatever team you are. What are your suggestions to support in order to raise awareness, strengthen capacity, and create enabling opportunity? So imagine you're a politician. So what would be your thinking, since you've understood that CO2 emission is real it's causing a lot of climate change effects. What will be your role? And what are the suggestions you provide? But the first thing is you have to identify the problems. So possibly I would have to go back to the Miro board so that you can have a look at what we have to work on before we go into the breakout rooms. So, yeah. So here is the Miro board. So you have everything here. So some of it will be team A. So let me increase this. You all have access to work on it. So team A, team B, team C, and D. So try to identify some challenges that you've seen as a politician or as a corporate organization, then provide your suggestions. So these are the sticky notes that you can take to write. So you can always take these to write and put them here. So just write and put them here. So depending on how you want it. So yeah. So yeah. So possibly maybe Sabrina, maybe you can help me. Let me give you the host, right? You can help me create four rooms. So let me just do this right away so that you can have the host. So
I can do it randomly. I mean, there is no pre-assigned.
yes, randomly. So, but I wouldn't want to share by everybody would go to one room, you know. So it's important. Maybe you do it in such a way that everybody, will be equally distributed. So yeah. So Natasha, you can also help share the link so that everybody can have access to it. Then the floor is open to questions.
So we need 4 rooms because
4
we
rooms.
have
Yeah. Team A, B, C, D. Team A, B, C, D. So click on the link, the Miro board, and possibly by the time you are distributed into the rooms, go into your room to discuss with your team. See yourself playing the role of all these guys. So if you're a politician, if you're a corporate organization, imagine what will be their role and try to provide the solutions. So youth organization, indigenous people, and local authorities. So you have the challenges that you've identified. So let me just do this. Yeah. So good to see everyone again. So while we know that team B are just typing their information, so what we can do now is we have a feedback from team A. So since we are also running out of time, so possibly one representative from team A, one representative from team B, C, and D. So give us 2 minutes from the challenges you were able to gather together, as well as the suggestions and why the suggestions. So do we have any representative from team A?
Sorry, who is going to present from team A?
Dr. Hai, sir, you can continue, please.
Thank you very much. I was not prepared to take over this role, but yes, it was a nice group work actually in our case, and Natasha took over the duty to put the notes in the Miro platform, and all other group members contributed a lot. However, the points are like challenges. If I can just highlight just few issues like higher responsibility of the politicians. So, and another point is that, sorry for the noise here.
No worries.
I think Natasha, could you please take over because there is a noise in my case.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dr. Hai. Okay, I just want to just highlight the main point that we have written here. The first challenge is as a politician to mitigate the climate change or the climate issues would be the high responsibility and enforcing the rules. strengthening the environmental democracy and acceptance from the public. So to mitigate those challenges, we have drafted here some suggestions as a politician could enforce, that is like to have an international agreements and tree plantation as a political agenda, adaptation of policies, and the green HRM policies could be implemented in the organizations, in the smaller organizations as well. And the more important thing is like enforcing the 3R policies, like reuse, recycle, and renovation. Thank you.
Thank you. So any question from other participants to the politicians? Okay. While Group B is trying to put their points together, so let's go to Group C, Team C. So a representative from Team C.
Maybe I can do that.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
We relatively late realized that we were supposed to write down the challenges as well. So we just came up with one that and I understood it in a way that what kind of challenges in sort of working on climate change and the general deforestation issue, the kind of challenges we would face in our group. And as we are a youth organization or sort of a non-governmental organization, I feel like a common problem could be that our voice is not being heard that much, and that we're not really being taken seriously. So that's a major thing. And generally, we came up with a couple of suggestions of how to fight the general issue that we were talking about. I can very quickly maybe go through them. One thing would, for example, be to actually offer governments to cooperate on climate or deforestation issues, since that way also people from civil society or people from the youth could actually be involved in these sort of problem-solving processes. And sort of the one example could be to create a joint commission that works on these issues, and NGOs could be involved in decision-making processes. Another general thing that NGOs could work on is to put pressure on governments to act on certain issues. So, for example, to create laws that protect certain territories that contain forests, or to just generally promote policies of sustainable tree farming. So, that trees are being cut down in a pace that, in a way that the general number of trees don't decrease, but rather maybe still increases, even though we are cutting some down for their use. The next thing was to inform the public about political decisions that regard deforestation. So, for example, if governments decide to cut down one part of a forest and people don't really know about it, then it could be also the role of an NGO to sort of promote publicity. Then we had like promoting green city centers to just generally aware or promote the idea of in green environments and the general awareness of that having a big importance. One very practical thing is to create fundraisers to actually buy land that contains forests. That idea was inspired by the Wilderness International Initiative, which gathered money to buy several hectares of forests in the Amazon rainforest. And that way you can actually really easily protect land from being cut down, or the trees being cut down, if that is your own property. Generally, obviously, the most important thing is, I think, which is also what is happening right now in this meeting, is to spread awareness and to educate people on climate change and the deforestation dilemma, since awareness and knowledge is a very big key point. We had another point from Rima saying that the education of farmers is very important, and to spread knowledge about laws regarding their work, and to spread awareness about sort of their role of farming in the big playfield of climate change. And one last thing, one practical thing again, is to sort of organize events where people come together and actually plant trees. in certain areas. So, you know, you kind of have more trees that grow. Yeah, that's a short rundown for our suggestions.
Great, thank you. I think yes, I'm seeing a lot of interesting suggestions. We moved from team A down to team C, and so let's go to team D. So thank you, team C. Thank you. So team D. So who is representing team D?
I think I'll go.
Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So you have to speak louder.
Yeah, okay. So as Team D, we were the indigenous peoples and local authorities. So one challenge, I think it's just a general feel, before I like break it down, is the failure to acknowledge the importance of indigenous communities and like the local authorities in their cohesiveness and protection of natural resources, especially forests. So our first challenge was deforestation by farmers and breeders. This in the context of like large-scale farmers and the breeders, the livestock breeders who like do it on large scale, and then the privatization of sections of natural and indigenous forest land. You find that section of forest would be sold to private people, and then the indigenous community would not have access to it anymore. And then lack of cropland, forest land, and pasture. So due to this privatization, you find that you're only limited to probably sections of the land that you have access to, and then eviction from indigenous lands by private corporates. This we have seen this in so many communities where you'd find that in the name of conservation, you're being thrown out from your indigenous land, and then lack of economic resources. So since that is the only livelihood that we've known coming from the natural resources, then we lack alternative means to like make a life. Yeah, and then for the suggestions that we heard, the first one was implementing climate smart agriculture and natural forest landscapes. So this can be incorporated maybe from a grassroots level and from the community's perception and context going upwards. And then, like, for example, what works for them, what crops would they prefer, rather than what crops do you think we need? And then have policies to prevent external ownership of forest land. So have just policies to protect, in short, the forested land that especially has belonged to indigenous communities for years. And then have a participatory approach in decisions affecting indigenous people. So in the case that there are any decisions to be made in the lands that we own or the resources that we have as indigenous people, then we should be involved in the decision-making process. And then gazettements of indigenous practices, religious places, culture as protected natural or regional heritage. So this is because when we lose access to these lands and when these forests disappear, we just don't lose our livelihoods, but we lose our culture, we lose part of our religion and part of ourselves. So if they start, if there are policies to or acts to recognize what we do, then we are more protected. And then have advocacy programs to share indigenous knowledge. There are practices that have been there for ages, and correlation and coexistence. Indigenous people know how to coexist with nature unlike any other person. So it becomes very important if we can share this knowledge and if this knowledge can be widespread. And then have assisted natural ecosystem regeneration and ecosystem regeneration. So for the processes that for the places that have lost the aura of what used to be before. So if you can have systems to regenerate these places to their once former glory, and then have policies that place indigenous people as the protectors of forest lands. I think this goes back to what I've said before, like if you can acknowledge indigenous people as the protectors and preservers of forests, and then have local conventions between communities to help them manage the available natural resources. So we see that eventually the conflicts happen between communities. So if you can have programs where these local communities, the local authorities coming together and knowing how they can manage and take care of the natural resources, then it becomes better. And then having capacity building programs for environmental education. This can also go back to also indigenous knowledge and just help getting to know more about the protection of the environment, and then creating documentaries, of course, with consent from the local communities. Most times it's done without, sometimes it's done without asking for consent. So if it can be consensual, then creating documentaries to like create a widespread knowledge about the importance of indigenous people and the local authorities in forest management. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was very comprehensive, Team D. Thank you. Fantastic suggestion. So let's go to Team B. So any representative? We need extra 10 minutes to finish. So
yes.
Yeah, please. Okay, good. Go ahead, please.
So Team B?
Adekunle, can you take over for us if you are done typing?
I think any member of the group can go ahead to do that. Pending the time, Adekunle will be able to switch on his microphone.
Okay, so the challenge with me is that I don't really have access to the Miro board, but I have an idea of the few things that we discussed in the group. Yeah, so for the challenges as corporate organizations, the challenges is we are looking at our profit or our money. So if we push in money, would the money serve the right purpose? And would the money be able to have returns in financial terms again? So those are the challenges that we have as corporate organizations. And the solutions that we have thought of is creating now some funding system that are there to support now the few ideas in climate change actions. So, for example, if a country would like to go into renewable energies, then we have a specific funding for that, and they will have to apply for it and submit their proposal, their project proposal, and we will go through it and see if it is bankable enough. Then we will just use that funding system that we have already created to fund it. And we will also we also talked about networking, as we saw it in presentation. So networking as corporate, we cannot go in individually. So we will collaborate at a national and international level, so that you know who is funding what and who at a time, so that you will not all go in and be funding the same area whilst other areas are still void and no one is taking any action there. So for example, since we are talking forestry, so we thought about for countries or politicians, they need money to run their countries. And sometimes they might get some business ideas that they would like to implement where there's a forest. So they will have to go and destroy the forest so that they can plant an industry there. So if we have the money, a funding system down, to tackle that, then they can come to us and with another business idea that is more climate friendly, and we would rather use that money to fund them, and in that way we are contributing to protecting and tackling the climate issues. So I think these are the few ideas that I can recall and that I can put on the table as Team B. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is, I mean, I really appreciate all the inputs from everyone. And I think, yes, I don't know, maybe we have one or two questions before we move on to quickly finish up the session. So do we have questions? Questions? Okay, in the absence of none, I will quickly share my screen, then we can. So the reason why we had this reflection and feedback is for us to see how different stakeholders play a key role in helping to manage forests to combat climate change. So you could see that it was not so easy for you to be in that role. And when you assumed the role, you were pouring out the ideas and you were putting it down. So these are some of the challenges that you face in the real life world when you are in any of all this position, in terms of maybe indigenous people or local authorities or youth organization or non-government organization, corporate bodies, policy makers or politician. So this gives you an overview of what role you can play in climate advocacy. So coming to an end, I would employ Natasha to help us with this last short video. It's a very short one. It's important for us to know that the arts is the only option we have. We can run to planet Mars or Jupiter or Venus, and we need to protect, and we need to work together. It's a global action. It requires partnership, and it requires a lot of concerted efforts. So all hands must be on deck, and this video will give you an overview from the Amazon deforestation and climate change. So Natasha, are you ready?
Growing up in southern Brazil, my 5 sisters and I ate meat pretty much every day. It's just part of the culture here. Per capita, Brazilians are one of the top consumers of beef on the planet. Now, with the world's growing appetite for beef,
Can you click on the decline so that we can see
to
everything?
increase its market
Exactly.
share,
Thank you.
partly by selling to the US, the world's biggest consumer of beef, and to China, where demand for beef has grown 25% in just 10 years. I understand the need to develop and grow, but does that have to come at the expense of the rainforest and the climate? The Amazon rainforest is about the same size as the continental United States. 1/5 of the world's fresh water runs through it. And it is home to more species of animals and plants than anywhere on Earth. The Amazon represents more than half of the remaining rainforests on the planet. This forest is so vast, but it is not indestructible. To find out what's at stake, I'm going to talk to one of Brazil's top climate scientists, Dr. Antonio Nobre. So Antonio, tell us a little bit about this amazing green carpet of heaven over here.
Well, most people don't have the opportunity to come on the top of the forest. If you see all this many shades of green that you see here, it's because biodiversity is the essence of this type of forest. Every species of trees has thousands of species of bugs. And also if you get a leaf of one of these species and you look to the microbes that is sitting on the top of leaf, you find millions of species, millions. And this is all below our radar screen, so to speak, because we don't realize it's invisible. And the trees are shooting water from the ground, groundwater, up high in the sky. And this goes up into the atmosphere and releases the heat out there. And this radiates to space. And this is very important as a mechanism to cool the planet. They're like air conditioners. open air conditioning. That's what the forest is.
So in other words, if we lose all these trees, we're losing the air conditioning that cools off the whole planet.
Not only that.
Not only that.
No. The trees are soaking up carbon, you know, the pollution that we produce, like carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Burning gasoline in our cars, you release carbon dioxide in the air, or burning coal. And the trees use carbon dioxide as a raw material.
So the trees are storing all this carbon. So if you come and cut it down and burn it out, does that mean that all that carbon goes up in the air?
Absolutely, yeah.
What would happen if this forest was gone?
When the forest is destroyed, climate changes, and then forest that's left is damaged as well. And then the forest grows drier and drier and eventually catch fire. So in the extreme, the whole area becomes a desert. And that's what is in store if we deforest. So we have to quit deforestation yesterday, not 2020 or 30. And there is no plan C. You know, you have plan A. Plan A is business as usual. Keep plundering with all the resources and using as it were infinite. Plan B is what many people are attempting, you know, changing the matrix of energy and using clean sources, stop eating too much meat, and replanting forests. If that doesn't work, then we go to plan C. What's plan C?
I have no idea.
Going to another planet.
No, but we can't.
We don't have another planet. So either we work with plan B or we're
done.
Yeah, we're done. And so
Well, why would
plan B has to work. It has to work.
People have to take accountability, because it can't just be like, I'm leaving over here and whatever happens over there, you know,
It's
who
not my
cares?
problem,
It's
yeah.
not my problem, because it is everyone's problem.
Yeah, people should wake up. It's like when you are in the midst of an unfolding disaster, what do? You panic? No, you move it. Move. That's what we need to do.
Thank you. I think so. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for this. Yes, I think we already ran out of time for the e-visa session. So thank you to everyone for joining, and hopefully maybe during the other set of sessions, because we'll be having the slates also, so we can also have more discussion briefly. So thank you for the attention, and I mean, we might not be able to take much question, but at least you've learned one or two things, and hopefully it was insightful, and we continue to keep in touch. Then I think, I don't know, maybe I have one or two questions. Okay, no question. We meet tomorrow to continue the youth advocacy, youth climate advocacy, and we hope we'll be seeing you again, another interesting session. I think, yeah, we've been able to touch different aspects in one or two workshops. And I hope you'll be able to apply this at your local activities or events. And I hope to see you more. I mean, we hope to see you more tomorrow until Friday. So, I mean, from my head, thank you for joining, and bye-bye from my head.